Okay, thank you for being at the meeting today. Clearly, Councillor Scott isn't here. She's been called away on some business that she could not defer. So she's asked me if I'll take the chair today. So I think most people know me, but Shirley Condon, Vice Chancellor at the University of Bradford and Deputy Chair. So I've been asked to remind everybody to please press the button, just as I didn't, when you want to speak, and then press it again, more importantly, when you finish speaking, because if you don't, the people on the live stream can't hear anything and they think we've gone into miming mode. So that would be very helpful. And the camera system will pan on to whichever microphone is switched on. Brilliant. So let's move on to apologies for absence. Connor.
Apologies from Councillor Scott, Councillor Khan, Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Kilbane, Claire Paxman, Nikki Davis, Sharon Ryding, Dr. Peter O'Brien, and Dr. Milton Brown and Kay Butterfield.
Thank you. So in terms of declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests, there are none today because we're not going to be making any decisions in relation to published papers. So just to remind everybody that in the appendix to item 6 and item 7, there are some confidential papers, and if anybody would like to refer to those confidential papers, please raise your hands so that we can give Connor the instruction for the live stream to be turned off during that time. And then after that, if there are any questions, we will turn it back on again, if that's okay. Brilliant. So let's move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of February, which just feels like last week to me. It wasn't long ago. So they should be fresh in everybody's mind. So I'm going to ask if people are content with these as an accurate record of the meeting. I'm looking for nods. No, can't see any disagreement. So let's note that this is considered to be an accurate record of the meeting. Thank you. So then we get on to our Chair's update. So this is the second meeting, obviously, in 2024. We did meet very recently, and it was only a month ago. So some of the things that we are discussing today, however, are of significant interest to this committee and indeed also to the Mayor's newly formed board. So we are going to be paying particular attention to the economic strategy and the skills review. But in terms of what's been happening since the last meeting, we know that the Convention of the North took place on the 1st of March. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there, but I did have some representatives there. I understand it was a successful event with Michael Gove announcing deeper devolution for West Yorkshire, which we will be talking about on our agenda, which is very welcome. And today's agenda, obviously, as I say, considers that. The Chancellor's spring budget, I don't know what other members think, but it didn't really do much for the skills and agendas, really, that we're facing in our area. It was a little bit underwhelming in terms of support for what we're trying to achieve. There were some discrete projects, and in fact one of the announcements, Michelle reminded me, was actually a re-announcement. But just to highlight, there was additional funding for the special free schools of 105 million towards 15 new special free schools in England, and 2,000 additional places for children with special educational needs. The apprentice growth sector pilot, the additional jobs support pilot, and upskilling fund pilot, 7.4 million. I don't know whether any of the officers want to comment on any of this. No? Felix?
So just to say that West Yorkshire obviously had some high-profile announcements around that time with level 4 devolution and also investment zones, which some of the revenue investments there is focused on skills. So this committee will have the opportunity to look at that when the time comes. There were other announcements around the National Poetry Centre and British Library and some funding to move those projects on, but very light on any other thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good news on the investment zones. We need to work together to make them work cohesively. Okay, so that is me in terms of update. So shall we move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the economic strategy? And this is really an important document, and because we're not really approving anything here, it is really a really good opportunity for us to take our time to engage in a bit more of a fuller debate about the economic strategy as it stands, and the work that will be going on to further refine this. And obviously at some point in time there'll be a skills and employment business space that will form part of this strategy. I'm not sure of when that will be in the timings. Yeah. So Felix, do you want to say something about the timing first of all?
Thank you, Chair. Joe, in a second, will get into a little bit of detail on this. And as the Chair said, we will really welcome your candid views on the paper you've had, the evidence that you've received so far, and bring your experience to bear, really, to improve the work we're doing. In terms of timings, if all goes well, the idea is to launch this early autumn. Now, the national agenda seems to be packed around that time, potential general elections and obviously party conference season and other things to consider. So we're not quite sure yet when, what exact time it will be, but we're looking around that early autumn point. Between now and then, Joe and the team will publish where we are with the evidence within the next 2-3 days. There will still be more work that we'll publish as they get ready. We'll then go into a period where we take out the messages from the evidence and begin to work through what the priorities should look like and what actions we should take, what our role is as a combined authority, what the role of our partners will be in delivering these. There's also a fair bit of work that we'll have to put into setting out what the agreed outcomes are from this work and what indicators and performance metrics we will use to help us understand whether we are achieving these or not. This will be, in all likelihood, a long-term strategy, probably a 20-year strategy, but the actions that we'll want to put in the document will have a short to medium-term view to them, because we need to know exactly what we're doing in the short to medium term to begin to turn around what needs to be turned around and to take advantage of the opportunities there. The evidence, as you would expect at this point, picks up a lot on challenges, weaknesses, problems, and so it could seem negative. That is just the way it goes at this point, because that's what the evidence throws at us. That's not necessarily what will be in the strategy. The strategy will be what we're saying we're going to do to address these. And so it will be more positive in outlook, focusing on opportunities and strengths. But this is the time where we tell each other the whole truths about some of the challenges that we face. And the evidence you've got will, should show the 3 broad areas where we feel the evidence is pointing us around productivity or the lack thereof in many areas in our economy. And that is important because even though it's an economic term, it's the closest we can get to understanding what prosperity we are creating or generating and where that's going. So the UK's productivity in general is weak, has been for a long time, and this area is below the UK average. So it gives us a sense where we are. Having said that, there are some sectors where we are really strong, and it's important that we know those, and we celebrate that, and we work out how we can do even more. So productivity is one. There's another, the other is around access to opportunity. Usually this is around skills, and it's equipping people with the skills they need, and then the utilization of that skill and in the workplace to achieve their potential. And finally, entrenched poverty and deprivation, which turns itself up in so many different ways in the data, whether it's health, participation in the labor market, etc. So however you cut the evidence, when it comes to the challenges and weaknesses, they sort of tend to sit around these three broad areas. Um, and the task we've got through this work is to not only admire that problem, spend a lot of time looking at the problem, working out different ways of explaining it, but then go on to say, so what are we going to do about it? And that is the tricky but interesting part of the work. So having said all that, I'll hand over to Joe and to Peter, who will walk us through summary of the evidence. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix. Yeah. So the paper sets out the progress and gives an update on the work that we've been doing to develop a new economic strategy. We did speak to the committee back in October about this work, so there's been quite a bit of activity that's gone on since then. There are two appendices to the paper. So Peter is going to talk through the first one, which sets out a summary of some of the economic evidence, particularly where it's relevant to skills. And then the second appendix sets out our thinking on an emerging framework. So just quickly before I pass to Peter to go through some of that evidence, I was just going to fill in some of the wider work that's gone on to build our evidence base. So as well as a really comprehensive economic assessment that, as Felix said, we're going to be publishing on the Combined Authority website, hopefully this week, if not early next week. There's been a range of other pieces of work as well. So we've undertaken an online consultation to get views of the public on the strengths and opportunities and the challenges that they see in the economy. We've commissioned an external piece of work on sector strengths and particularly to try to unpick where there are growth opportunities in our sectors and understand the relationship between different parts of the economy and emerging clusters of excellence in the region. We've worked with universities on a call for evidence to look at a range of issues, most notably around childcare and the impact that's having on the economy. And we've had a wide range of conversations and discussions with many of the members of this committee in different settings. We brought together a panel of independent experts earlier in the week to really scrutinise and challenge that economic assessment, and had a really good conversation with them about what their thoughts are on the way we've approached the evidence and what this means for emerging priorities. And we had a workshop with local authorities and Integrated Care Board members, along with the Centre for Thriving Places and the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, to really try to unpick the challenges around making this an inclusive economic strategy and what that means for sustainability and what that means for health. So a lot of activity. I'll pause here and pass to Peter to go through some of the economic data, and then we'll just touch briefly on the framework before we open up for questions.
Thank you, Joe. So we're having some technical problems with sort of rendering the slides on the screen. So can I ask members of the committee to try and follow the slides that I'll be referring to within their packs? So first of all, I'm kicking off with on page 18, which is entitled Framework for Analysis. So what I'm going to do is just give you a selection of cover a selection of the evidence slides in your pack, rather than working through the whole thing. Partly because I'm conscious that we did discuss some of the elements during our discussion of the strategy in October. But I thought, first of all, it'd be useful to give you a sort of overview of the overall framework that we're using to develop the evidence base. And as Felix mentioned, we will be publishing a comprehensive evidence pack in the next few days. In terms of the approach to the evidence, the overall purpose is to provide an assessment and understanding of West Yorkshire's economic needs as a basis for developing clear strategic objectives. And those strategic objectives will be focused on delivering the vision for the West Yorkshire Plan. And in order to do that, we have to understand, first of all, how West Yorkshire is currently performing, and also how it's like to perform in the future in the absence of corrective action. And the central focus, as Felix mentioned, is on productivity. That is the basis for economic growth and also underpins progress on living standards. And I'll be talking about sectoral structure and economic geography, which are key determinants of productivity. But in terms of this question about identifying the problem and then thinking about the solution very much lies with, in terms of closing the productivity gap, lies with increasing investment and also improving the supply of skilled people. And there are a number of potential levers that you can see in the sort of framework chart relating which are crucial to attracting investment and also attracting, retaining and deploying skilled people, and they relate to housing, the transport system and the availability of land and premises. I'm not going to go into all of those today, but they will be covered in the full evidence pack that will be circulating. And then the final point, which is crucial, is that raising productivity does not automatically translate into inclusive growth. And within the pack, we consider the issues that act as constraints on those benefits being shared, those benefits of growth being shared across the full population of West Yorkshire. So I'm now moving to slide 20 or page 20 of your pack, and that focusing on real productivity growth. So looking at recent performance on productivity in West Yorkshire, there's a substantial deficit of 14% in output per hour worked between West Yorkshire and the national average. So output per hour worked is a central measure of productivity. So basically the West Yorkshire economy is nearly £10 billion smaller in terms of its annual output than it would be if it matched the UK average productivity performance. So that's a substantial gap, bearing in mind that the whole economy of West Yorkshire is worth about £60 billion per year. And that gap has widened, that productivity gap has widened. So in the period to 2004 and 2008, West Yorkshire productivity growth was similar to the UK average, in fact a bit higher. But from 2008 onwards, it's been growing at half the rate, half the UK rate. You can see that Caldale and Kirklees actually outperformed the UK average throughout the period from 2004, but you can also see that Leeds has underperformed since 2008, and that obviously, because of the size of Leeds, has a key influence on West Yorkshire's performance. In terms of looking to the future, the modelling we've done suggests, based on past trends, that productivity gap that we currently have will widen further. So I'm now moving to slide 23 or page 23. And what we're looking at here are the industry sectors. And there are two major areas of opportunity in terms of industry sectors in terms of addressing the productivity gap, and they're manufacturing and knowledge-based services. In the manufacturing sectors, we have established specialisms like textiles, and their productivity performance is close to the national average or above in some cases. So the scope to improve productivity performance within those sectors is relatively limited, although we need to continue to support them. So in terms of manufacturing, the onus will be very much on attracting additional specialisms in high value segments, and some examples are set out in the slide. In terms of service specialisms, they tend to be heavily concentrated in the centre of Leeds, and unlike for manufacturing, there's a significant productivity gap for these activities, even though they're well established. So what we need to do there is attract additional investment into these sectors and capitalise on the benefits of agglomeration, particularly within Leeds city centre. But for both of these aspects, we need the increased investment needs to be accompanied by a better availability of skilled people, whether that's engineers, programmers, technicians, and analysts, and so forth. So moving on now to slide or page 26. So this slide essentially shows you maps the position of West Yorkshire in terms of its investment and skills performance. So a big part of developing our industrial base and raising productivity is about securing additional investment and also deploying high-skilled people within high-performing businesses. As the diagram shows, it's a bit small. This presents big challenges as we're located firmly in the bottom left of the distribution of areas in the scatter diagram. So West Yorkshire has low investment and low skills. So we're operating in a low investment, low skills, low productivity equilibrium. Until 2013, West Yorkshire's investment performance was actually similar to the UK average, but then it's diverged in a negative way since then. And so we estimate that investment will need to be raised by £2.6 billion per annum to support our productivity objectives. And in terms of skills, we have an estimated deficit of 100,000 higher skilled workers in West Yorkshire. So that's the increase we would need to make to match the UK average in terms of representation of high skilled workers in the labour force. And even to match the performance of Greater Manchester on that, we would need an additional 60,000 high skilled workers. So I'm moving forward now, past quite a few slides, to slide or page number 35, and that's entitled, I think it's 35. It's about West Yorkshire performing below the national average of the supply of skills. So I'm not going to go into the detail around the investment deficit. That'll be presented in the fuller pack that we'll be publishing. But with regard to building the skills base, there are two routes to addressing that, and I'm going to cover this very briefly. First of all, it's about developing our indigenous pipeline of skills. So we have a number of skill supply issues highlighted in the pack. I'm not going to explore them in detail because we also cover them in October. But as you can see from this current page, we've got young people in West Yorkshire who are less likely to achieve qualifications at level 2 and level 3 as they enter the labour force at age 19. We have mixed performance across local authorities on entry rates into higher education, and there are also constraints on both public and private investment in skills. So we're seeing lower levels of investment in skills and training and education over time amongst adults. Increasing the demand for skills, though, is through better availability of high-skilled jobs is key to incentivising people to invest in their own skills. I think coordination of supply and demand of skills is a sort of key theme running through the evidence. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to page 43. So another key aspect of building the skills base is attracting and retaining talent in West Yorkshire. So on page 42, not page 43. On page 42, you can see data from internal migration. And what we can see from internal migration figures is that West Yorkshire sees a net influx of people who move into the area for university, but then many of them are lost over time to other areas from their early 20s onwards. And to further illustrate this, we have about 35,000 people with a UK domicile who qualify from West Yorkshire higher education institutions each year. And the graduate outcome survey indicates that around a quarter of those are in employment at the 15th month mark and have a job location in West Yorkshire. So a retention rate of about a quarter of graduates. So the key to improving that retention, attracting and retaining talent is around increasing the number of higher skilled jobs in the area. So it shows the importance of a coordinated approach to supply and demand. So the next slide is not actually in the pack, but it's about inclusive growth. So one of the central challenges of inclusive growth is about enabling people to benefit from the growth that's generated in the wider economy. And that's partly about connecting people to opportunities through improved transport. And we can see that there are big issues with that. So it's more difficult for residents of deprived areas to reach employment sites via the bus network compared with travelling by car. And the disadvantage are obviously less likely to own a car. So I'm not going to go into the details around transport. Again, will be considered in the main pack that we're about to circulate. But I think it's important to note that obviously it's not enough to deal with sort of physical connectivity. Many of our most deprived communities are actually located in and around the city and town centres of West Yorkshire, including Leeds City Centre. And it's worth noting that these centrally located neighbourhoods, even though they're deprived, tend to have relatively productive and dynamic economies. So even though opportunities are potentially within walking distance of residents of these deprived neighbourhoods, they're not typically able to access them. And skills obviously plays a key part around that. So 15% of the West Yorkshire population have no qualifications or are qualified at the lowest level, which limits access to employment. Within our most acutely deprived communities, they are also the neighbourhoods with the worst skills and qualification deficits. And in addition to that, of course, education outcomes for disadvantaged young people are significantly poorer than for the non-disadvantaged. Okay, so and then I'm just moving backwards to slide 40 now. So this is about economic inactivity. So the proportion of people in employment in West Yorkshire is below the national average, and the main factor behind that is the region's relatively high economic inactivity rate. And as you can see from the chart, that varies as well by local authority. So we have 250,000 people of working age who are economically inactive when students are excluded from the figures. And inactivity is also the main reason that some groups face low employment rates. So within that, I would include disabled people, women, people from ethnic minorities, and also older people. And that problem of inactivity has been intensified by the pandemic. So, for example, the number of people aged 50 to 64 who are inactive has grown by about 20,000 during the course of the health crisis and the aftermath. And a growing issue underlying inactivity is health. So we've got around 80,000 inactive people, a third of the total who are long-term sick, and that number's grown by around 10,000 since the pandemic. And more widely, the number of people with a disability in the labour force is growing. So over the last decade, the number of people of working age with a disability has grown by more than 90,000 to 390,000. So that's an increase of nearly a third. And that includes a rapid growth in the number of people, of disabled people who are in employment of around 67% over the last decade, but still only 57% of disabled people are in a job. So I'm now going to move to the slide on page 46, and that's just my concluding points, which are available there for people to read. So I'm not going to work through each of those. So I'll hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Peter. So I think Felix said at the beginning it was pretty, I don't know whether he used the word depressing, but it's challenging. There's key challenges, and I think we understand these challenges. I think when you see it brought together, the gravitas of it all sort of is more at the sharp end. It might be helpful maybe if we pause there and just ask, in terms of the data that Peter's described to us and the conclusions that he's presented, I mean, what do people think about the drawing out of Peter's conclusions, and is there a view on whether you feel that they represent the data that you've seen? Is there something missing? Natasha?
Hi, yeah, I can definitely say from working with economically inactives that it's very reflective of what you've said. What I would ask is, just in terms of reaching those individuals and understanding the challenges, it sounds like we've got a grasp, for example, with serious health issues. I know from studies we've done at Better Connect that mental health challenges were one of the key areas. Just in terms of understanding what those challenges are, and the surveys that were discussed right at the start, actually, how have we managed distribution of those surveys and made sure that actually the people who need it the most are actually answering the questions around what those challenges are?
So can I just ask which surveys you're referring to, sorry?
Just right at the beginning, Joe mentioned that there was a survey, there have been surveys that have been done. Yeah, so it was a broader consultation that was undertaken. So we did it through Combined Authority, Your Voice application online, and so we did. We have a range of voluntary and community sector groups on our database that we sent the survey to try to make sure we got a range of voices represented. But absolutely recognise that there's you know, it's that engagement piece is really important, and we do need sort of targeted conversations with particular groups. So I think there's certainly more that we want to do in terms of following up that consultation, and particularly reaching out to some of those community groups for further conversations with them.
Sonia?
I was just going to add to that, Natasha, that as part of the wider evidence base for the economic strategy, we've recently undertaken a piece of work in direct consultation with young people around employment support, so that will form part of the evidence base that goes into that as well.
So I guess what we're seeing here is that I'll get Peter to come in. Peter?
Sorry, I didn't have anything to add on that specific point. I think it was Tim had his hand.
It was probably. Thank you, Shirley. I'm obviously particularly interested in the higher level skills elements in the document, and I think it's good to see the recognition both of what you call the Indigenous pipeline issue, and also the one around graduate retention, or indeed graduate acquisition and retention. My sense is that we've tended to pay more attention to the Indigenous pipeline issue, perhaps because of some of its broader implications, than we have to the graduate acquisition and retention element. And it might be as a result that it's worth some further scrutiny of that perspective. I used to spend a lot of time going around talking about Yorkshire and Humber as a skills magnet, because we were in a very distinctive position regionally in that we were net importers and creators of graduate talent. Now, I believe that picture is not quite as positive as it used to be, which is, I think, an issue of concern for, well, not just West Yorkshire, but South Yorkshire and North as well. It is still true, nonetheless, that we are far more effective at retaining and importing talent at that age, broad age, and retaining it than many English regions. So if you look at comparators like the northeast of England, they are subject to a very significant drain of 18 plus talent because of people exiting to go to university elsewhere and then not returning. I think we would benefit from a deeper understanding of our relative strength in that area, and what the challenges are in reinforcing and perhaps, if we possibly can, returning to that unusual position as net creators of graduate talent.
Okay, I think that's a good point. Do you want to come back on that, Peter?
Yes, please. So we've recently did a session in consultation with in conjunction with Yorkshire universities, looking at sort of graduate flows. It's not actually been that work's not actually been published yet, but I think it's about to be. So we do have quite a lot of intelligence around at Yorkshire and the Humber level around those sort of graduate flows and retention performance, which we could certainly show. But on the broader point about attraction versus the Indigenous pipeline, there's recently been work undertaken by Resolution Foundation, where their assessment is that simply building the internal pipeline is not sufficient to generate the number of skilled workers that will be required. But the balance between pipeline development and attraction is obviously something that the committee would, it's a strategic decision about how, what approach should be taken, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think in the paper it did say 100,000 additional graduates, which is not an insignificant amount. And somehow collectively we've got to understand what that means and in what flavours those graduates should be in terms of discipline areas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments. The questions are public sector. An awful lot of people work in the public sector in this region. How is that factored in here? Because this all seems about business, and we know that there's some recent research that showed that there has been an improvement in the quality in productivity across the private sector, just not as good as elsewhere. but virtually none for 30 years in the public sector. So how do we deal with that all at once? The second question is graduates in the. You've said what the issue is, but is that the same elsewhere? Are there net importers and exporters of graduates from their region, and who do we compare to? And it's also not a recent problem. I think more than 20 years ago I was on the board of Graduates Yorkshire, which was set up to try and solve this problem. I don't see much link up between this and the local authorities' economic strategies. I'm not sure how they fit together at the moment. And they're nowhere near this detail, the local ones, and nor should they be. It's great to work. It's just seeing how they link up better would be there. And then if I read this as evidence on its own, I'd think twice about setting up a business here. And I just think there's got to be something in the evidence gathering bit of it that's around the positives, we can do, and I think that needs to come out at that evidence stage as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Colin?
Yeah, so this is in reference to the draft areas of action, page 67, last two bullet points, which say that skills are a big driver of inequality between places and have a central role to play in an inclusive economy. Then it says there is a need to move beyond just upskilling and understand where it might be appropriate to focus support on lower level skills with the opportunity to open up in-work support. So I suppose my comment would be the biggest lever that the combined authority has around skills in that sense is the adult education budget, and the pressure at the moment on providers is the opposite of that, I think. I don't know, I'm looking at Michelle to kind of confirm or deny, yeah, so as providers we're under pressure to increase participation at level 2 and 3, and which will inevitably increase what we already have, which is waiting lists at the other end. So, and that kind of says the opposite. I'm just curious what happens.
Michelle?
So you're right that currently the devolved adult education budget is the biggest lever that we have, but of course it is the minority of spend on skills. So I think this is talking about the full piece, and I think you're absolutely right. We're trying to do a lot with what we've been devolved, which is not sufficient for the need. So I would read this as being about broader than that pot of money, and about the scale of the challenge, and you know the broader spend, both public spending and of course what employers and individuals spend as well.
Okay, so you wouldn't see a shift in the emphasis then at the moment?
Well, I think the economic strategy will drive our approach to all commissioning, but I think that it's too soon to draw that conclusion directly.
Well,
Yeah, but I guess whatever, something has to happen, doesn't it? Collectively.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to pull whatever levers we've got with all of our partners to collectively address that issue, as well as obviously constantly.
Yes, I agree,
pushing
Chair.
for
The real problem is there's not enough money in the system.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, just a few things. One, some of which is coming back on what other people have said. So, somebody said it's really depressing reading, and why would a business invest? And I suppose one of the reasons to me is because actually there is an enormous amount of untapped potential out there. People who are only not skilled because they don't have the opportunity to have those skills. And if businesses can find a way to harness that and encourage it, they can in effect be in there first. So I think that's one way of looking at it. But I suppose also it's just a reflection that still business and the local authorities together have just got to keep on pushing from this region to government, whatever government that might be, that there does need to be public sector investment in this area to help us unlock all the potential that there is. Because the papers talk about the connectivity issues, both physical and digital, that there are, and that just does need government investment ultimately. So we've all just got to keep working together. and somebody mentioned how, I think it was again you, Martin, talked about how it fitted within with the local authority strategies, and I think there has been a bit of a sort of toing and froing around that, because my advice has been that Bradford, for instance, have hung back on their strategy because they've been waiting to see what this was like, whereas Calderdale has sort of cracked on with our inclusive economy strategy and just approved that earlier this week at Cabinet. But we recognise that we might have to go and look at it again slightly when we see what's coming out of this. But I think for nearly all the local authorities, the most important thing is that in these figures, in this information we have here, there's talk about inclusive economy, because for most of us, that's just so central that we just don't want productivity at any cost if it continues to leave large sections of our population behind, which really then took me on to slide page 62, the one that says boosting good work across all sectors of the economy, because we are an employment and skills committee, and I've been here before and said that ultimately not everybody is either going to want or going to be able to have a skilled job, and it's just as crucial that the unskilled jobs that a society needs to function properly are also well paid. And so I think it's recognised by that slide that that's always got to be borne in mind, and it goes back again to the inclusive and economy strategy point. And I think that the slide suggests, or somewhere in there, it's suggesting that in fact productivity can actually harm increases in skills levels, and productivity at the top can actually harm those at the bottom, because obviously if you've got people with skills who can afford the more expensive houses, then the housing becomes more expensive and the people at the bottom are disadvantaged even more. So yeah, inclusiveness just absolutely crucial, I think, to all of the local authorities.
Okay, thank you. I think Alex looked as if she wanted to come in, and then Tim.
Yeah, just on the conclusions bit, it says West Yorkshire underperforms on skills supply. What does that mean? Was question one. And then the other question, just following on from that point, I'm not sure if I'm clear from this in terms of what we need to do on a skills side. Like, it talks about not being underperforming on higher skilled jobs and high skilled opportunities, but I'm not sure what those high skilled jobs or high skilled opportunities are for then the skills sector and the skills supply to match it. So I don't think the doom and gloom data is being provided with any collateral content or context that can then help us and the colleges and the universities respond accordingly.
So in terms of skill supply, we're talking about people with qualifications, basically. So it's a point about, we've got a low proportion of people level 4, but we've also got quite a high proportion of people with no qualifications or qualified below level 2. So obviously we need progression pathways. So that's skill supply. In terms of the kind of content of those higher skilled jobs, we're essentially talking about management professional and associate professional jobs in the main. And in the full evidence pack, there's a bit more detail about that. But in terms of the jobs we're talking about, it's across quite a wide range. And I mentioned a few of them in my sort of presentation. So engineers, technicians, digital professionals, and also on the business side, so the business professional type roles. So we probably can we can go into more detail around that. We've also got our forthcoming labour market report, which details that in a lot more sort of granularity.
Because some of those roles aren't level 4 and above roles, are they? So, some of those engineering, technician, digital aren't level 4 and above. So why do we need more level 4 and above if the jobs out there aren't requesting level 4 and above, if they can be done at level 3?
So a lot of the growth that's happened in the employment base has been for jobs at level 4 and above over the last decade, and that is the key sort of segment in terms of productivity, which isn't to say the other elements of the workforce are not important. So say technicians, they might be at level 3, and they're essential within the manufacturing sectors we were talking about, sort of supporting innovation and sort of research and development. So it's not purely about those level 4 skills. It is about a broad-based approach as well. Maybe we can bring that out more clearly, but this is a kind of fairly brief summary.
Yeah. We don't want to get into a situation where we are focused so on higher level that we don't have those pathways at entry level, and this kind of level 4 and above, or this, you know, maybe unconscious bias towards lower level skills not being productive, I don't think is super helpful language, maybe, if this is going to go in the public domain. So, yeah, and then as colleges providers, we just need to know what more in terms of the jobs and the skills, so we can create the content and the curriculum and the courses to support that.
So I think that the point that I guess we're going to take away from that is we need to see the pathway of skills at all levels as being important, as each are important, and one can lead to another, and there's a necessary importance to have low level skills. I guess as pointed up, but I think the way it's got to be presented is part of that of an ecosystem of skills. So I think Joe, Tim, and then Joe.
Okay, thank you. Two points, please, to consider. One, in terms of the draft priorities, it's I asked the question, so what? Yeah, so yeah, to do these things, what are we aiming at with this? What's the target? You know, by these interventions, yeah, what impacts are we going to see? Because for me, it's all it's all some very good words, yeah, but actually, you know, by doing these things, yeah, where are we aiming to get? You know, what percentages are we seeing improving? What gaps are we seeing closing?
And Felix, at the beginning you mentioned there would be some work done on KPIs and objectives. I wonder whether you could give us any high level work that's been done on the level of ambition.
Thank you, Chair. We're not there yet, Tim. So that will come, but we're not there. We're at the point where we need to make sure we all agreed on the scale of the challenge. The ambition will then be, we need to close this gap. So what do we do? And that's very rapidly where we're getting to. So after this round of sessions, conversations that we're having, refining the evidence base, we're quickly moving into exactly as you said, so what? What are we going to do? The priorities there are really just an initial thinking about where things could be, but we are nowhere near actually agreeing a set of priorities, nowhere near that. But what we do not want is to have anything that could come across as a bit bland and something that everybody will believe with, everybody will agree with, because actually there are some tough choices that need to be made. So just going back to the conversation that Alex and Peter are having earlier on, there are some difficult choices we have to make because we only have so much money, as Colin was saying. We only have so much in terms of resources. So where are we going to put our resource? Are we going to target, say, the lower levels to make sure everybody has a minimum level, or are we going to have a different target? Those difficult decisions have to be made. We can't, if we keep spreading the jam the way we've been doing so everybody gets a little bit, we will remain where we are because that's what we've been doing for decades.
Thank you. That makes that's good to hear. Where does that fit, Felix? So in terms of plan timescales, where does that that planning? There's difficult decisions. Where does that get made? Where do they get surfaced?
So what I was saying right at the beginning, after today, I think we finished this cycle of committee meetings. Am I right? I hope so anyways. We are at the end of the week and pre-election period coming very quickly. The team then goes back, we publish the evidence. The work we're doing now is teasing out from the evidence base what those initial priorities look like. We will then come back to you to say, does this resonate? Does it make sense? Does it follow on from the evidence that you've seen? What are we missing? What are the wicked questions that we either avoiding or have missed in some way? So in the end, these documents, these processes are negotiated, and it's not sort of Felix or a group of people in a dark room somewhere coming up with stuff. We'll come back to you and to all committees. In the end, politicians will make the final decision about where the priorities will lie.
It's irrelevant to this point, Tim.
Can
Okay,
I
I'll come back.
can I just do the second? Yeah. So the second one in the papers we talk about NEAT, yeah, and actually our levels of NEAT. I can't see it anywhere in the actions, in the priorities, how we would go about addressing that, because effectively at the end of every academic year we're just adding to our challenge, and if we could stop some of that, if we could incentivise business and education to spend more time talking to each other, will help.
Yeah, this was also actually mentioned at the Mayor's Business Board, because there was a huge discussion of skills, levels, needs, etc. at that committee as well.
Yeah.
So we'll know.
Yeah, so very well picked up. We definitely had some information on needs in the pack. It may have fallen out in the various refinements, I don't know, but we'll just go back and make sure. Yeah, thank you.
Or is it? It's in the pack. It's the follow-on. It's whether it comes through in the priorities and the focus.
That's what all of us will
start
shaking down the priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I had Joe and Tim, but Tim, is your point related to the other Tim's point?
No, I'll follow you.
Okay, Joe and then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. It was just touching on the points that Alex and Councillor Dacre made about level 4 skills and inclusivity, because in Wakefield we're struggling with level 3 skills. So if the main focus is level 4, we're not even achieving the level 3. And is there any demand in Wakefield for a level 3 and level 4, which we've seen in previous papers to this committee? There isn't in Wakefield. So it's the importance of inclusivity in the skill level for the job pool that's out there as well. So I think what Alex was saying is there might be level 4 skills demand elsewhere, but there isn't level 4 in Wakefield, and especially if we're struggling with level 3 as well. So I just wanted to support both those 2 points of inclusivity and the skill level. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Felix wants to come back on that one.
Thank you, Chair. Now, what I'm going to say might seem a bit, but just go with me, please. With all these things, there's always a tension. Do you put your resources to give people the skills they need for what is currently present? Or do you actually put your resources towards supporting people to reach a level which currently might not seem apparent, but that's where you need to be? So you need to be working both the demand and supply side. If we forever support people to be equipped to only work in industries that are currently present, requiring levels 1, 2, and 3, we will always be having this conversation about lack of prosperity and inclusion and poverty and deprivation, because no matter what we say, at that level, wages are lower. However, that is the present. So there's something we need to be doing at that level to make sure we are meeting that current need. But where is the balance in terms of how we are equipping people with the skills they need so that if their abilities mean they can be level 4 and above, irrespective of whether they live in Wakefield or Bradford or wherever, they are able to get to that level and access the opportunity that brings. That then leads to all sorts of things around connectivity, being able to have a line of sight to a job wherever it might be, because I think I will challenge back the thinking that, if somebody's living in, say, you said Wakefield, I'm just being provocative here. There's somebody lives in Wakefield, this might be the level, there are no jobs there. That person doesn't have to work in Wakefield. It's on us to make sure that person can access a job wherever that job is. Or of course, it would be great if we could have that level of employment and skill levels across the whole patch. This is a multi-generational job. I'm saying all of this just to say, when we have these conversations, there's always a tension. And we need to work together to make sure in the end we agree where we put in the focus, the limited resource that we've got to be able to get there. And in the end, wherever we agree to go, that would be as officers where we put our shoulders to.
Okay, Joe's she's bidding to come back now.
It's just, I completely get where you're coming from on that, Felix, but are we the chicken or the egg in that situation in regards to businesses coming into the districts? Because if we train all our people up to level 3 and 4 and there's no businesses coming in demanding that level of skill, they're going to go elsewhere. And if we're all across West Yorkshire all trained up to this level, they're going to go further afield, and we'll have this migration situation that we've got where skilled workers are leaving West Yorkshire. So are we the chicken or the egg? Which comes first? Do we need businesses in to bring the skill level up, or do we need the skill to bring businesses in? And it's the whole thing of what comes first.
I think I might bring Peter, Tim in, because I think no, Tim, I think he wants to come in. I think he might be able to respond to this point as well.
This is it's at least a tangentially relevant point, and I guess it's another one about how well the evidence base supports the conversations, in this case, the conversations around the edge of our responsibility here in employment and skills. Because actually one of the good things I thought about the document was the way that it recognises the interrelationships between issues in employment and skills and in other areas. I think health is particularly well represented in the document, and I think there is an increasing recognition of those interrelationships. The one I wanted to raise as perhaps needing more profile is the interrelationship between employment and skills and innovation. And I suppose one of the ways in which that manifests itself in the document at the moment is that we have an analysis that, at its most granular, talks about skills at level 4+. Now, actually, when you start to look at the intersection between employment skills and innovation, it is often skills at level 7 and 8 that are most critical. And we tend not to see those because we are predominantly given figures at simply 4+. And now I know that some people may see this as being relatively marginal, but when you look at the areas in which we are most able to drive productivity growth, where we're able to establish differentiation between West Yorkshire and other regional economies, then it is that intersection between innovation, employment and skills that is often the most critical factor. So I think, Shirley, it's a request, not necessarily for a mass of information on level 7 and 8, but at least a sensitivity to level 7 and 8 and how we connect that across to the innovation agenda.
Yeah, okay, understood. Good point. Jo, do you want to make any other comment? No? Okay. Councillor Derkle?
Thanks, Chair. I suppose, just to come back and Felix is asking us for what we want as a priority, then I think it's probably obvious from what I said that I would have to say the priority that Calderdale would want you to have would be on the lower level skills, because you need those before you can have the higher level skills. So for people to even have any chance of getting any further, they need to start, and we just think the risk of just concentrating on the higher level skills is that you'll just have this whole bunch of people who just get left behind, and we'd say our priority is that you've got to start at the bottom.
Okay, thank you, and noted. I think, Colin, were you want to do?
In comment on the last two comments, so from Sylvia and from Tim, I agree with that point, and I think I was kind of trying to make a similar point earlier. In response to Tim, I agree with Tim in terms of the analysis and beyond level 6 to level 7, but as a country and as a region, and this is endemic in the we have far too few people actually being qualified to level 4 and 5. We go to level 3, then to level 6, and that's just historic in the whole structure of education in the country. And if we're going to make use of limited investment as a country and as a region, we need more people to step off into skills at level 4 and 5 and then go beyond level 6 to level 7 to focus on level 6 in high level skills.
Okay, thanks for that. And I guess in reality, we've got to be able to look the telescope through both ends, haven't we? We've got to be able to think about the innovation that's needed for businesses, or they won't thrive. And we've got to think about the other level skills, because without those lower level skills, we can't. So we need an ecosystem where we, in prioritising one thing, we're not saying another thing isn't important, and it's how do we address the things that are still important while we might believe that the priorities might be these 4 things, for example. So I guess what we're asking for is a bit of reflection on the whole skills system, seeing that within its context, the very important use of how we describe skills, and low level skills possibly is maybe not actually a good way of describing skills, because they're skills, they're important skills. And maybe if we can get a narrative going in this section of the economy, which is presenting skills from a very different perspective, with a different narrative on it, but managing to capture the importance of both, and whether it's level 7, but I guess in terms of the allocation of resources, I think we've got to be very clear on the priorities, why they are priorities, how we articulate them, and then how do we articulate what is important but might not be such a priority, and how that might change over time, and how the other players come in to be able for us to fund level 7 and above with maybe Innovate UK and other players. So we've got Natasha who wanted to come back, and then I think Martin, and then maybe we should move to our next item.
Just really quickly, just in terms of all of this discussion about the different levels, we see the gap for economically inactives getting wider and wider, and I think we just need to be careful where we do have the pots of money and that funding is distributed, that actually in terms of what the outcomes and the outputs are from that funding, let's just focus on progression as opposed to putting an arbitrary target. So that would be my ask.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a bit concerned that we're trying to do too much with too little money. By too little money, and there's never going to be enough money in the world. But the most of the money that funds our skills does not come through the combined authority currently. It comes from all sorts of different sources, and that whole funding system is broken. It doesn't. We fund colleges in the wrong way. They deliver what they're paid to fund rather than what the need requires. That's not a criticism of the college. It's a criticism of the funding line for that. And so anything we can do to try and influence how those decisions are made and match up the need of the individual and of the employers across the board.
Yeah, thank you. Colin?
I was just going to kind of make a comment on, again, the national system, and because we seem to be talking about how we allocate resources, and if you think about the system beyond level 4, the resources follow the choices of the students. So if more students study in West Yorkshire, we actually bring money into the economy in West Yorkshire because it's a national funding system. If more people in West Yorkshire choose to study at level 4, 5, 6 and 7, we actually draw national money into the economy in West Yorkshire. It's not about how we're allocating money, it's about how we're influencing our population and people to come in that draws that money and draws national funding. And so it's not about who allocates it, it's about how we drive the behaviours of our population.
Yeah, which is then of course linked to what we do at the lower levels in some respects to drive aspiration and interest and yeah. Okay. Are we content that we've had enough input into this discussion and to feed back to further iterations of the document? I think one of the other key things that we should just probably summarise is that what has come across nearly in everybody's comments is this importance of inclusivity. And whatever we do, we need to be doing everything we can to pull all levers on that. Okay. So shall we move on to the next item then, which is the skills system review, and this is going to be presented by Michelle.
Thank you very much. So at the meeting a month ago, we shared with you, and we thought it was a good time to review governance and an operating model really around the skills system in West Yorkshire, particularly in anticipation perhaps of greater devolution. And that turned out to be incredibly timely with the announcement of level 4 devolution coming when it did, which I think has really focused our minds on the importance of this work. And in the discussion that we had at this committee a month ago, you were particularly interested in governance and in the interaction between local governance structures and the work of this board, and the different options for kind of how that could be optimised. So the confidential appendix that you have is a draft that was current at the time when when the papers were published, which sets out what we're seeking to commission in this space. There have been further changes made since it was published, and we are aiming for that to be released imminently. And I would really like to take the opportunity to ask this committee, please, when we do appoint somebody to carry out this work, please to provide them with your support, your insight, and your views as to the operating model for West Yorkshire on the employment and skills agenda. And I'm going to pause at that point, but I am also going to take the opportunity to remind people, if you do have any questions about the appendix specifically, please do alert us before you make your point so that we can ask for the live stream to be switched off.
Okay, any questions on the paper other than the appendix at this point?
Is this a delivery model?
So no, not entirely. So it's more about decision making, governance, ways of working. But yes, absolutely, there would be implications for delivery in terms of the roles, in terms of how we want the system to work here in West Yorkshire, and therefore the constituent roles of different parts of the system. So which parts of the system should have a delivery role, which parts of the system should be about strategic leadership, for example, and how do we ensure that, and which parts of the system should be about commissioning, which is a very important part of the devolved functions that we have so far, and those that we'd envisage going forward. So it's probably all of those parts of the system.
Because this is, I mean, devolutions, we're all finding our feet with it and making the most of it currently. But that would mean the combined authorities commissioning a piece of work and an organisation to deliver the piece of work, seeking it to make recommendations on whether it should deliver things in the future.
Okay, so I think that question you're asking relates to the appendix in terms of, you know, who does what. So maybe we could take the live stream off and then we'll go back to the question. Okay, we're back on live stream now. So just to conclude then, that the committee was asked to review the specification and engage with the support with the review when it commences. We've got support in the room for that and to engage, and I think that we've completed that item. Good. So item 8 then is the next part of the agenda is the decision on work well, and I think Michelle, you were going, oh no, Sonia is going to tell us about this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper relates to two programmes under the banner of Work and Health, Work Well and Universal Support. And employment support, work and health is an area where we're expecting significant changes through future level 4 devolution in West Yorkshire. So this presents a really good opportunity for this committee and for the work across West Yorkshire to align across the health, integrated care board systems, the job centre, system and alongside the work of everyone around this table as well, in order to simplify what we all know is an incredibly complex landscape that has a multitude of strategic commissioners and even more delivery providers across West Yorkshire. So the paper outlines the application for Work Well, and that full application is available to you as a confidential document. The programme is aimed at supporting those out of work and those at risk of falling out of work due to ill health, and that can be swiftly supported to return to work. It's an ICB, Integrated Care Board, led application. We're anticipating that there will be 15 vanguard areas in the country, and a decision as to who's being awarded those areas will be made around Easter time, we understand. The proposed delivery model aligns with our existing employment support infrastructure, and we've also received some in-year funding which gives some capacity to recruit a post and to do some co-design work with key stakeholders in the region in anticipation of that future devolved work as well. Secondly, I just want to highlight to members that as announced in the spring 2023 budget, so last year, a supported employment programme to help disabled people and those with health conditions into sustained work called Universal Support is expected to be grant funded to mayoral combined authorities. The detail remains extremely limited at this stage, but we are anticipating announcements in the run-up to elections with a rollout of that programme from autumn 2024. I just want to highlight that this is a significant piece of work that will require the strength of partnerships that we have in West Yorkshire across the Integrated Care Board, local authorities, combined authority and Job Centre Plus. As I've already mentioned, we fully intend to use some of the resource that we've got through the in-year funding through Work Well to help us plan for that. I'm very keen to seek the views of this committee about that programme as we get more detail and information about it. So the request in the paper is for this committee to consider and retrospectively acknowledge the West Yorkshire application for the Work Well programme and to endorse the acceptance of the funding should we be successful. But can I just remind members that is the appendix is confidential, so if you've got specific questions about the application, can you just indicate so that we can turn off the live stream? Thank you, Chair.
So just to be clear then, it's retrospective because you had to fit it in before this committee met and there wasn't time for it to be discussed here. So just for absolute clarity. So if we were to take that part of this agenda item first, the Work Well, are people content to acknowledge that? Natasha?
Yeah, hugely supportive of this. I think this could make a massive difference. Just an ask, will the VCSE sector be part of the partnership?
Okay, thank you. So we note that. Sonia, and then the second part then, this is the Universal Support Programme on, what was it called again? I've forgotten the name of it. Supporting people with disability. Work. The other part of it, the Universal Support Programme, that's going to be grant funded. You're going to bring further information to us on that, and you don't want, there's nothing more you can say on that?
No, the information's not available.
Okay, so that's just for our information. Thank you. Okay, let's move on now then to the devolution paper, and Josh is going to present an overview on this paper.
Thank you, Chair. So to recap, Level 4 devolution guidance was published in November 2023 by colleagues at DLUC. It outlines a further move towards greater devolved funding and powers for eligible institutions, so MCAs and the like. The guidance represents a move towards standardising devolution in England rather than specific deals for each region, as we've seen previously. And while it is felt that this differs from West Yorkshire's full aspirations for devolution, the opportunity to pursue further devolution is, of course, welcomed. As such, a letter to apply for Level 4 devolution was submitted by the Mayor and leaders on the 30th of January 2024, and as was referenced by the Chair earlier in this meeting, a letter was published by the Secretary of State on the 1st of March following the Convention of the North, confirming that West Yorkshire meets the eligibility criteria for Level 4 devolution. So next steps will involve combined authority and DLUC officials working together on the implementation of this. The paper that you will have all received for this committee highlights specific aspects of Level 4 guidance that are relevant to this committee. That includes the convening of a regional labour market partnership board to include relevant senior officers, including those from DWP, the devolution of non-apprenticeship adult skills functions, which includes the removal of ring fences on free courses for jobs, and granting further sector flexibility on boot camps. You'll be able to see the conditions for those in the footnotes to the paper. Exploration of data sharing agreements with DWP, and reviews to align boundaries of the LSIP with MCA boundaries, which, as you know, is already the case in West Yorkshire. So I'm going to solicit comments in a minute. Before I do that, it is worth pointing out that the framework does specify that aspects of Level 4 devolution will be contingent on success of trailblazer deals in Greater Manchester and West Midlands, and that's particularly in relation to data sharing and future employment support pilots. And guidance for a deeper devolution deal in the North East was published on the day of the spring budget, which did outline some key differences with Level 4 guidance, particularly around co-design skills pilots and exploring outcomes related to Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. That's not in your paper, but I'll be happy to talk about that if people deem it relevant. Secretary of State's letter made it clear that this is not the end of the line for devolution, so I would like to pause here for comment, asking members to firstly note the propositions of Level 4 devolution in relation to employment and skills, and also provide views on what West Yorkshire should be looking to secure in future devolution deals, specifically around careers, employment support and adult skills, in order to meet our strategic goals for a prosperous region with an inclusive economy and well-paid jobs for all. So I'll hand back to the Chair.
Thank you, Josh. Very easy paper to read and good use of the footnotes. Well, thank you for that. Questions? Councillor Decker?
Well, it's not a question, but it's just the answer to your request for views is surely that we just want that single budget without interference to spend as we think fit across the region, in consultation between the combined authority and the authorities and other relevant bodies.
Clear and simple. Any other comments for Josh? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, welcoming a really positive step towards deeper devolution. But how do we then look at how we bring our vision and aspirations to how we make them reality? And then looking back to the skills review and some of what may come out of that, how do we look together at how we can maximise the opportunities that this brings? But yeah, broadly, absolutely welcoming this. And then, and just really understanding that importance of local decision making, and how far that gets devolved down depending on what future governments may bring, looking at the reports from Gordon Brown and other matters linked to it. And the leaders of core cities have made it really clear that national government needs to understand how important local government is in driving investment and economic growth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can see Josh is taking his own notes as you speak. Colin?
Yeah, from the college's point of view, we'd love to have a single funding stream for adult skills and not have to mess around with multiple streams. That wanted that for a long time. Within that, there's a comment about LSIPs, and at the moment, colleges have a responsibility to respond to the LSIP. The money is somewhere else. The structure of this is a complete mess, and it's just a complete mess nationally. So I'm not quite sure what our vision is for what happens to LSIPs, because at the moment we have to do an accountability agreement, which is attached to our funding agreement, which is completely separate from this. We've got to respond to the LSIP, and then somebody else again has the money. We're looking in three directions at once.
I mean, I'm very familiar with that from the colleges that we work with in Bradford, and I think sometimes there was almost a mapping of the LSIP to the college's accountability statement. So, yeah, I think that is to be noted then. Martin?
Yeah, the LSIP itself has no money. It's not, the money doesn't come from the LSIP. It's another body altogether. So local schools improvement are all about employer representative bodies, in this case the Chambers of Commerce, working with employers to provide a very small part of the picture of what the skills requirements are likely to be in the future. But it's a very small part, nowhere near the detail that Peter goes into on this overall analysis. It's a snapshot of any particular time to try and help that system. So it's just a piece of research. And you're right, the money train is wrong. LSIF has got no relationship with the LSIP other than saying it has to support it, but it had to agree to that before it'd seen the written documents. And so it's odd. And the money itself does dwarf any money that goes into actually undertaking the research.
I mean, maybe the opportunity we've got is to think about how we work with the chamber as the LSIP's been developed and knit it into the work of our strategic and operational work here.
Yeah, but we're at a good time to do. I'm chairing the one in West Yorkshire now, so it's a good time to do.
Yeah. Any other observations, Alex?
Yeah, just on the free courses for jobs A, B, and boot camps. How will it look different to how it currently does when you've taken those restrictions away? Do you know what it will look like? Is there going to be a consultation with the colleges and providers, or have you already kind of mapped that out?
So I can tell you what is on the table, although there's some work to do on the implications of that, so I can't fully answer that. So in terms of what's on the table for boot camps, the flexibilities are fairly minor. There's a lot that has to be retained in terms of the model, the branding, the contractual requirements. So boot camp's not devolved. With contracts, the Command Authority's contract issued by the Department for Education year on year that we bid for. And none of that is due to change. So the element that could change in regard to boot camps is the proportion of what we commission that is outside of a prescribed list. Okay, and I don't think that's probably not the biggest flexibility that you and other key partners would want to see there. On free courses for jobs, we're talking about full devolution, and one of the real benefits of that is that it would enable us to think beyond individual years, and that's a real constraint actually in our ability and that of partners to plan ahead. So that could be really beneficial. But yeah, we will work with the partnership to look at how that's implemented.
So does that mean a multi-year funding envelope could be a level 4 devolution opportunity?
We'll need to look at how we implement that. But we would our anticipation is that full devolution of free courses for jobs, should we meet the threshold, means that we're no longer constrained by year on year kind of spending rules in the way that we're currently having to manage. That does have practical implications, doesn't it, for when you can roll.
Natasha?
Sorry. That's music to my ears around the extended funding. We do have some research which I'm happy to share with the committee on the impact of short-term funding on beneficiaries, on the key workers and the organisations that are providing that, in terms of the anxiety of that. So I'm happy to share with that, but absolutely music to my ears. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I just had one question, which was about the Regional Labour Market Partnership Board to include relevant senior officers, including DWP. Does that mean another board, or does it mean a board can be that board?
I mean, that is their proposal. What we are saying back to them is we already have such arrangements here. So can we not set up a new board? And can one of our arrangements serve that purpose or not? Because otherwise we're just making an already complex situation even more complex. But with all of these level 4, we are now going to enter a year of discussions, negotiations, and development of delivery plans with government So none of this will be implemented till 1st of April 25 at a push, depending on the next government.
Okay, thanks for that, Felix. Any final comments? Josh, has that been helpful for you?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, if anyone does have any, we've talked a lot about adult skills and careers. If there are any thoughts on employment support, I'd welcome them, but similarly, not going to force people to tell me.
Okay, so you've got an open invitation, but probably not open forever, to forward any additional thoughts or questions to Josh directly. Okay, I don't think we have any other business, so I think we can call the meeting closed at 15:35. Thank you.
Thank you very much.